is present when the Christian is mealy-mouthed, and so goes on and fears no colors, whose grace had it but her dagger of zeal ready, and courage to draw it forth in a wise reproof, would make sin quit the place, and with shame run into a toll. Job 29, verse 8. The young men saw me and hid themselves. The princes refrained talking and laid their hand on their mouth. And doth not God deserve the best service thou canst do him in thy generation? Did he give thee grace to lay it up in a dead stock, and none to be the better? Or can you say that he is wanting to you in his love and mercy? Are they not ever in exercise for your good? Is the eye of providence ever shut? No, he slumbers not, that keeps thee. Or is it one moment off thee? No, the eye of the Lord is upon the righteous. He hath fixed it forever, and with infinite delight pleased himself in the object. When was his eye shut, or his hand either from receiving thy cries or supplying thy wants? Nay, does not thy condition take up the thoughts of God, and are they any other than thoughts of peace which he entertains? A few drops of this oil will keep the wheel in motion, that ye may be able to stand against the willies of the devil. These words present us with the reason why the Christian soldier is to be thus completely armed, that ye may be able to stand against the willies of the devil. The strength of which argument lies in these two particulars. First, the danger, if unarmed. The enemy is no mean, contemptible one, no less than the devil, set out as a cunning engineer by his willies and stratagems. Secondly, the certainty of standing against all his wits and willies, if we be thus armed, that we may be able to stand. As no standing without armor, so no fear of falling into the fiend's hands if armed. To begin with, the saint's enemy, the devil, described by his willies properly the methods of Satan, which signifies that art and order one observes in handling a point. We say such one is mythical. Now, because it shows ingenuity and acuteness of wit, so to compass a discourse, therefore it is transferred to express the subtlety of Satan in lying of his plots and stratagem, in his warlike preparations against the Christian. Indeed, the expert soldier hath his order as well as the scholar. There is method in forming an army as well as framing an argument. The note which lies before us is, Doc, the devil is a very subtle enemy. The Christian is endangered most by his policy and craft. He is called the old serpent, subtile above other creatures, an old serpent above other serpents. Satan was too crafty for man in his perfection, much more now in his maimed estate, having neither recovered that first damage he got in his understanding by the fall of Adam, and as man hath lost, so Satan hath gained more and more experience. He lost his wisdom indeed as soon as he became a devil, but ever since he hath increased his craft. Though he hath not wisdom enough to do himself good, yet subtlety enough to do others harm. God shows us where his strength lies, when he promiseth he will bruise the head of the serpent, his head crushed, and he dies presently. Now, in handling this point of Satan's subtlety, we shall consider him in his two main designs, and therein show you his wiles and policies. His first main design is to draw into sin. The second is to accuse, vex, and trouble the saint for sin. First, let us consider the devil as a tempter to sin, and there he shows his willy subtlety in three things. First, in choosing the most advantageous season for tempting. Secondly, in managing his temptations, laying them in such a method and form as shows his craft. Thirdly, in pitching on fit instruments for his turn to carry on his design. This has been read by Peter John Parisi, also known as Brian Dean. None of my audios are copyrighted. Please feel free to make as many copies as you desire to the glory of God. The Christian in Complete Armor, Ephesians 6, verse 11, chapter 5, chapter 1 of 5. So this is a subcategory of chapter 5. Of Satan's subtlety to choose out the most advantageous seasons for tempting. First, he shows his subtlety in choosing the most proper and advantageous seasons for tempting. In everything there is a season. Solomon saith, Ecclesiastes 3:1, that is, a nick of time, which taken gives faculty and speedy dispatch to a business. And therefore the same wise man gives this reason why man miscarries so frequently and is disappointed in his enterprises, because he knows not his time. Ecclesiastes 9:11. He comes when the bird is flown. 100 soldiers at one time may turn a battle, save an army, when thousands will not do at another. Satan knows when to make his approaches, when, if at any time, he is most likely to be entertained. As Christ hath the doubting, drooping soul, so Satan shows his black art and hellish skill in speaking words of seduction and temptation in season. And a word in season is a word on its wheels. I shall give you a view of his subtlety in special seasons which he chooses to tempt in. The first season he takes to tempt in is when newly converted. No sooner is this child of grace, the new creature, born, but this dragon pours a flood of temptation after it. He learns the Egyptians but some of his own craft when he taught them that bloody and cruel baptism which they exercised upon the Israelitish babies in throwing them into the river as soon as they were born. The first cry of the new creature gives all the legions of hell an alarm. They are much troubled at it, as Herod and Jerusalem were when Christ was born. And now they set in council to take away the life of this newborn king. The apostles met with more opposition and persecution in the latter days, when endued with large portions of Scripture, but with temptations from Satan in the former, when young converts, as you may observe in the several passages recorded of them. Satan knew grace within was but weak, and their supplies promised at the Spirit's coming not landed. And when is an enemy more like to carry the town than in such a low condition? And therefore he tries them all. Indeed, the advantages are so many that we may wonder how the young convert escapes with his life. Knowledge, weak, and so soon led into an error, especially in divided times, when many ways are held forth, one saying, here is Christ, another, there is Christ. And the Christian ready to think everyone means honestly, that comes with good words, as a little child that hath lost his way to his father's house, is prone to follow any that offered him their conduct. Experience of what he knows little, and if Adam, whose knowledge was so perfect, yet was so soon cheated, being assaulted before, he was well warm in his new possessions. How much more advantageous hath Satan of his new convert, in whom he finds every grace so great an indisposition to make resistance, both from its own weakness and the strength of a contrary corruption, which commonly in such is more unmortified, which makes it act with more difficulty and mixture, as in a fire newly kindled, where the smoke is more than the flame, or like beer newly tunnel, which runs thick, so that though there appears more strength of affection in such, that it works over into a greater abundancy of duty than in others, yet with more dregs of carnal passion, which Satan knows, and therefore chooses to stir when he sees troubled already. Secondly, when the saint is beset with some great affliction, this is as some blind lane or solitary place, fit for this thief to call for his purse in. An expert captain first labors to make a breach in the wall, and then falls on in storming the city. Satan first got power from God to weaken Job in his estate, children, health, and other comforts he had, and now tempts him to impatience and whatnot. He lets Christ fast 40 days before he comes, and then he falls to his work, as an army stays till a castle be pinched for provision within, and then sends a parley, never more likely to be embraced than in such a strait. A temptation comes strong, when the way to relief seems to lie, though the sin that Satan is wooing is, when one is poor and Satan comes. What, wilt starve rather than step over the hedge and steal for thy supply? This is enough to put flesh and blood to the stand. Thirdly, when the Christian is about some noble enterprise for God's glory, then Satan will lie like a serpent in the way, an adder in the path, that biteth his horse's heels, so that his rider shall fall backwards. Thus he stood at Joseph's right hand to resist him. The right hand is the working hand, and his standing there implies his desire to hinder him in his enterprise. Indeed, the devil was never a friend to temple work, and therefore that work is so long a-doing. What a handsome excuse doth he help the Jews unto! The time is not come. God's time was come, but not the devil's, and therefore he helps them to this poor shift, perverting the sense of providence, as if it were not time, because they were so poor, whereas they thrive no better, because they went no sooner about the work, as God tells them plainly. Paul and Barnabas had a holy design in their thoughts to go visit the brethren in every city, and strengthen their faith. The devil knew what a blow this might give to his kingdom. Their visiting might hinder him in his circuit, and he stirs up an unhappy difference between these two holy men, who grow so hot that they part in the storm. Acts 15:30. There were two remarkable periods of Christ's life, his entrance and exit. His entrance into his public ministry at his baptism, and his finishing it at his passion. And at both we have the devil fiercely encountering him. The more public the place, Christian, and the more eminent thy service for God, the more thou must look that the devil will have some more dangerous design or other against thee. And therefore, if every private soldier needs armor against Satan's bullets of temptation, then the commanders and officers who stand in the front of the battle much more. Fourthly, when he hath the presence of some object to enforce his temptation. Thus he takes Eve when she is near the tree, and had it in her eye, while he should make the motion, that assaulting two ports at once, it might be the harder for her to hinder the landing of his temptation. And if Eve's eyes did so soon affect her heart with an inordinate desire, then much more now it easy for him by the presence of the object to excite and actuate that lust which lies dormant in the heart. As Naomi sent her daughter to lie at Boaz's feet, knowing well, if he endured her there was hope that he might take her into his bed at last. If the Christian can let the object come so near, Satan will promise himself his suit may in time be granted. Therefore, it should be our care, if we would not yield to the sin not to walk by, or stand at the door of the occasion. Look not on the beauty with wondering eye, by which thou wouldest not be taken prisoner. Parley not with that in thy thoughts, which thou meanest not to let into thy heart. Conversation begets affection. Some of this have been brought to mar those whom at first they thought they could not have liked. Fifthly, after great manifestations of God's love, then the tempter comes. Such is the weak constitution of grace, that it can neither well bear smiles nor frowns from God without a snare. As one said of our English nation, it cannot well bear liberty nor bondage in the height, so neither can the soul. If God smile and open himself a little familiarly to us, then we are prone to grow high and one. If he frown, then we sink as much in our faith. Thus the one, like fair weather and warm gleams, brings up the weeds of correction, and the other, like sharp frost, nips and even kills the flower of grace. The Christian is in danger of both hands. Therefore, Satan takes this advantage. When the Christian is flush of comfort, even as a cheater who strikes in with some young heir, when he hath newly received his rents, and never leaves till he has eased him of his money. Thus Satan lies upon the catch, then inveigle a saint into one sin or another, which he knows will soon leak out his joy. Had ever any a larger testimony from heaven than Peter? Matthew 16, verse 17, where Christ pronounced him blessed and puts a singular honor upon him, making him the representative for all his saints. No doubt this favor to Peter stirred up the envious spirit sooner to fall upon him. If Joseph's party-colored coat made the patriarchs to plot against him, their brother, no wonder malice should prompt Satan to show his spite, where Christ had set such a mark of love and honor. And therefore we find him soon at Peter's elbow, making him his instrument to tempt his master, who soon espies his cloven foot, and rebukes Peter with a "Get thee behind me, Satan." He that seemed a rock even now, that through Satan's policy is laid a stone of offense for Christ to stumble at. So David, when he had received such wonderful mercy, settled in his throne with the ruin of his enemies, yea, pardoned for his bloody sin, now ready to lay down his head with peace in the dust. Satan steps in to cloud his clear evening, and tempts him to number the people. So ambitious is Satan, then chiefly, to throw the saint into the mire of sin, when his coat is cleanest. Sixthly, at the hour of death, where the saint is down and prostrated in his bodily strength, now this coward falls upon him. It is the last cast, indeed, he has for the game. Now or never. How come him now and ever? As they say of the natural serpent, he never is seen at his length till dying. So this mystical serpent never strains his wits and willies more than when his time is thus short. The saint is even stepping into eternity, and now he treads upon his heel, which if he cannot trip up so as to hinder his arrival in heaven, yet at least to bruise it, that he may go with more pain thither. The Christian in Complete Armor, by William Gurnall. Ephesians 6, verse 11, chapter 5, chapter 2 of chapter 5. Satan's subtlety in managing his temptations, where several stratagems used by him to deceive the Christian are laid down. The second way wherein Satan shows his tempting subtlety is in those stratagems he uses to deceive the Christian in the act of temptation. First, he hangs out false colors and comes up to the Christian in the disguise of a friend, so that the gates are open to him and his motions received with applause before either be discovered. Therefore he is said to transform himself into an angel of light. 2 Corinthians 11:14. Of all plots, it is most dangerous when he appears in Samuel's mantle and silvers his foul tongue with fair language. Thus, in point of error, he corrupts some in their judgment by commending his notions for special gospel truths, and like a cunning chapman puts off his old ware, parenthesis, errors that have laid long upon his hand, unparenthesized, only turning them a little after the mode of the times, and they go for new light, under the skirt of Christian liberty. He conveys in liberalism. By crying at the Spirit, he decries and vilifies the Scriptures. By magnifying faith, he labors to undermine repentancy and blow up good works. By bewailing the corruption of the church and its admiration, he draws unstable souls from it and amuses them, till at last they fall into a vertigo and can see no church at all in being. And he prevails no less on the hearts and lives of men by this willy than on their judgments. Under the notion of zeal, he kindles sometimes a dangerous flame of passion and wrath in the heart, which, like a rash fire, makes the Christian's spirit boil over into unchristian desires of and prayers for revenge, where he should forgive, of which we have an instance in the disciples, Luke chapter 9, verse 55, where two holy men are desiring that fire may come down from heaven. Little did they think from whence they had their coal that did so heat them, till Christ told them, Ye know not what spirit ye are of. Sometimes he pretends pity and natural affection, which in some cases may be good counsel, and all the while he desires to promote cowardice and sinful self-love, whereby the Christian may be brought to fly from his colors, shrink from the truth, or decline some necessary duty of his calling. This is really Christ's soon spy, when he got Peter to be his spokesman, saying, Master, pity thyself, who stopped his mouth with that sharp rebuke, Get thee behind me, Satan. Oh, what need have we to study the Scriptures, our hearts and Satan's willies, that we may not bid this enemy welcome, and all the while think it is Christ that is our guest. A second policy he uses is to get intelligence of the saints' affairs. This is one great wheel in the politician's clock, to have spies in all places, by whom they are acquainted with the counsels and motions of their enemies, and this gives them advantage, as to disappoint their designs, so more safely to compass their own. It is no hard matter for him to play his game well, that sees his enemy's hand. David knew how the squares went at court. Jonathan's arrows carried him the news, and accordingly he removed his quarters. It was too hard for his great enemy Saul. Satan, in the greatest intelliger in the world, he makes it his business to inquire into the inclinations, thoughts, affections, purposes of the creature, that finding which humor abounds, he may apply himself accordingly, which way the stream goes, that he may open the passage of temptation, and cut the channel to the fall of the creature's affections, and not force it against the torrents of nature. Now, if we consider but the piercing apprehension of angelistic nature, how quick he is to take the scent, which way the game goes, by a word dropped, the cast of an eye, or such a small matter, signal enough to give him the alarm, his experience in hard anatomy, having inspected, and, as it were, dissected in his long practice, whereby his knowledge is much perfected, and also his great diligence to add to both these, being as close a student as ever, considering the saints, and studying how he may do them a mischief, as we see in Job's case,
whom he had so observed that he was able to give an answer to God, what Job's state and present posture was, and what might be the most probable means of obtaining his will of him. And besides all this, the correspondency that he hath with those in and about the Christian, from whom he learns much of his state, as David by Hoshea in Absalom's counsel. All these considered, it is almost impossible for the creature to stir out of the closet of his heart, but it will be known whether he inclines some corrupt passion, or other will bewray the soul to him, as did David to Saul, who told him where he might find him in the wilderness of En-Gedi. 1 Samuel 24, verse 1. Thus will these give intelligency to Satan, and say, if thou wouldest surprise such a one, he is gone that way. You shall have him in the wood of worldly employments, overhead and ears, in the desires and cares of this life. See where another undershuts a bower, delighting himself in this child, or that gift, endowment of mine, or the like. Lay but the lime twig there, and you will soon have him in it. Now Satan, having this intelligence, lets him alone to act his part. He sure cannot be at a loss himself, when the scholars, parenthesis, the Jesuits, unparenthesized, have such agility of mind to wrestle and cast themselves into any form, being the persons they would seduce. Is the ambitious, the lust the heart favors, or the pleasing projects that he will put such upon? How easily, having first blown them up with vain hopes, does he draw them into horrid sins. Thus Haman, that he may have a monopoly of his prince's favor, is hurried into that bloody plot, fatal at last to himself, against the Jews. Is uncleanness the lust after which the creature's eye wonders? Now he may be the pander to bring him and his minion together. Thus we find Ammon, sick of the disease, sends for Jonadab, a deep-padded fellow, 2 Samuel 13:3, to put this fine device into his head of feigning himself sick, whereby his sister fell into his snare. Thirdly, in his general approaches to the soul, where he comes to tempt, he is molested, and asks but a little. He knows he may get that at many times, which he should be denied if he asked all at once. A few are led into a city, when an army coming in a body would be shut out, and therefore, that he may beget no suspicion, he presents, maybe, a few general propositions, which do not discover the depth of his plot. These, like scouts, go before, while his whole body lays hid, as it were, in some swamp at hand. Thus he wiggled into Eve's bosom, whom he doth not at first dash, bid take and eat. No, he is more mannerly than so. This would have been so hideous, that as the fish with some sudden noise, by a stone cast into the river, is scared from the bait, so would she have been affrighted from holding parley with such a one. Now, he propounds a question which shall make way for this. Hath God said, art thou mistaken? Could this be his meaning, whose bounty lets thee eat of the rest, to deny thee the best of all? Then he digs about and listens to the roots of their faith. Then the tree falls to easier the next gust of temptation. This is a dangerous policy indeed. Many have yielded to go a mile with Satan, but never intended to go two. But when once on the way, have been allured further and further, till at last they know not how to leave his company. Thus Satan leads poor creatures down into the depths of sin by winding stairs that let them not see the bottom, whither they are going. First, he presents an object that occasions some thoughts. These set fire on the affections, and these fume up into the brain, and cloud the understanding, which, being thus disabled, now Satan dares a little more declare himself, and boldly solicits the creature to that it would otherwise have defied. Many who at this day lie in open profaneness never thought they should have rolled so far from their profession, but Satan beguiled them, poor souls, with their modest beginnings. O Christians, give not place to Satan, no, not an inch, in his first motions. He is a bragger, and a modest one without doors. Will command the house, if let in. Yield at first, and I'll give us away thy strength to resist him in the rest. When the hem is worn, the whole garment will ravel out, if that be not mended by timely repentancy. The fourth way, wherein Satan shows his subtlety in managing his temptation, is in his reserves. A wise captain hath ever some fresh troops at hand to fall in at a pinch, when the others are worsened. Satan is seldom at a loss in this respect. When temptation is beat back, he soon hath another to fill up the gap, and make good the line. Thus he tempts Christ to defiancy and distrust by bidding him turn stone into bread, as if it were time now to carve for himself, being so long neglected of his Father, as to fast 40 days, and no supplies heard of. No sooner had Christ quenched the start with that, it is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. Matthew chapter 4, verse 4 and 5. But he had another on the string, which he let fly at him, tempting him to presumption. Verse 5. Then the devil taketh and set him on a pinnacle, and bids, Cast thyself down headlong, for it is written, He shall give his angels charge over thee, etc. As if he had said, If thou hast such confidence on God and his word as thou pretendest, show it by casting thyself down. For thou hast a word between thee and the ground, if thou darest trust God. And truly, though Christ had his answer ready, and was prepared to receive his charge on the right hand and on the left, being so completely armed, that no temptation could come amiss, yet note we Satan's temptations in Christ were like a serpent's motion on a rock, of which Solomon speaks. That makes no impression, no dent at all. Proverbs 30, verse 19. But on us they are as a serpent on sand or dust, that leaves a print, when not in the heart, yet in the fancy colors, that which is next door to it. And so the object there is ready to slip in great care if not observed, especially when he doth thus change his hand, as when we have resisted one way, fall on afresh another, yea, plant his succeeding temptation upon our very resistancy in the former. Now it requires some readiness in our postures, skill and all our weapons to make our defense, like a disputant when he is put out of his road, and hath a new question started, or argument unusually brought. Now he is tried to purpose. And truly this is Satan's way, when he tempts the Christian to neglect of duties of God's worship, from his worldly occasions, the multitude of them, or the necessity of following them. And this takes not, then he is on the other side, and is drawing the Christian to neglect of his worldly calling, out of a seeming zeal to promote his other in the worship of God. Or first, he comes and labors to deaden the heart in duty, but the Christian too watchful for him there. Then he is puffing of him up with an opinion of his enlargement in it, and ever keeps his spious and most sublimated temptations for the last. Fifthly, in his polite retreats, he shall have an enemy flee as overcome, when it is on a design of overcoming. That was Joshua's willy, by which he caught the men of Ai in a trap. Joshua 3:1. We read not only of Satan's being cast out, but of the unclean spirit going out voluntarily, yet with the purpose to come back and bring worse company with him. Matthew 12:43. Satan is not always beat back by the dint and power of conquering grace. But sometimes he draws off and raises his own siege, and the more handsomely to get the Christian out of his fastnesses and trenches, that so he may snap him on the plains, whom he cannot come at in his works and fortifications. Temptations send the saint to his castle, as the sight of the dog doth the coney to her burrow. Now the soul walks the rounds, stands upon its guard, dares not neglect duty, because the enemy is under its very walls, shooting in his temptations continually. But when Satan seems to give the soul over, and the Christian finds he is not haunted with such motions as formerly, truly he is now prone to remit his diligence, fail in his duty, and grow under infrequent or formal therein, as the Romans, whose valor decayed for want of a Parthian troops to alarm them. Let Satan tempt or not tempt, assault or retreat. Keep thou in order, stand in a fighting posture. Let his flight strengthen thy faith, but not weaken thy care. The partisans do their enemies most hurt in their flight, shooting their darts as they run, and so may Satan do thee, if thy seeming victory makes thee secure. The Christian in Complete Armour, by Gurnall. Ephesians 6, verse 11, chapter 5, chapter 3 of 5, of Satan's subtlety in choosing instruments fit for his turn to carry on his tempting design. The third particular in which Satan shows his subtlety as a tempter is in the choice of those instruments whom he uses for the carrying on this his design. He, as the master workman, cuts out the temptation and gives it the shape. But sometimes he hath his journeyman to make it up. He knows his work may be carried on better by others, when he appears not above board himself. Indeed, there is not such a suitableness between the angelic nature and man's, as there is between one man and another, and therefore he cannot make his approaches so familiarly to us as man can do to man. And here, as in other things, he is God's ape. You know, this very reason was given why the Israelites desired God might not speak to them, but Moses and God like the motion. They have well said, saith God, I will raise up a prophet from the midst of them, like unto thee. Deuteronomy 18:17. Thus, Satan, he uses the ministry of men, like ourselves, by which, as he becomes more familiar, so he is less suspected, while, Joab-like, he gets another to do his errand. Now, it is not any will serve his turn for this employment. He is very choice in the instruments he pitches on. It is not every soldier is fit for the embassage to treat with an enemy, to betray a town, and the like. Satan considers who can do his work to his greatest advantage, and in this he is ungodlike, who is not at all choice in his instruments, because he needs none, and is able to do as well with one as another. But Satan's power being finite, he must patch up the defect of a lion's skin with the fox's. Now the persons Satan aims at for his instruments are chiefly of four sorts. First, persons of place and power. Secondly, persons of parts and policy. Thirdly, persons of holiness, or at least reputed so. Fourthly, persons of relation and interest. First, Satan makes choice of persons of place and power. These are either in the commonwealth or church. If he can, he will secure the throne and the pulpit as the two forts that command the whole line. First, men of power and the commonwealth. It is his old trick to be tampering with such. A prince, a ruler, may stand for 1,000. Therefore, saith Paul to Elymas, when he would have turned the deputy from the faith, O full of subtlety, thou child of the devil. Acts 13:8. As if he had said, you have learned this of your father the devil, to haunt the courts of princes. Wind into the favor of great ones. There is double policy. Satan hath, in gaining such to his side, first, none have such advantage to draw others to their way, corrupt the captain, and it is hard if he bring not off his troop with him. When the prince men of renown in their tribes stood with Korah, Numbers 16, verse 2 and 10, presently a multitude are drawn into conspiracy. Like Jeroboam set up idolatry, and Israel is soon in a snare. It is said the people willingly walked after his command, Hosea 5:11. Secondly, should the sin stay at court, and the infection go no further, yet the sin of such a one, though a good man, may cost the whole kingdom dear. 1 Chronicles 21, verse 1. Satan stood up against Israel, and provoked David to number the people. He owed Israel spite, and he pays them home in their king's sin, which dropped in a fearful plague upon their heads. Secondly, such as are in place in office in the church, no such way to infect the whole town as to poison the sinister at which they draw their water. Who shall persuade Ahab that he may go to Ramoth-Gilead and fall? Satan can tell, I will be a lion's spirit in the mouth of his prophets. 2 Corinthians 22:21. How shall the profane be hardened in their sins? Let the preachers soak pillars under their elbows and cry, Peace, peace, and it is done. How may the worship of God come to be neglected? Let Hophni and Phinehas but be scandalous of their lives, and many, both good and bad, will abhor the sacrifice of the Lord. Secondly, he employed persons of parts and policy. If any hath more pregnancy of wit and depth of reasons than another, he is the man Satan looks upon for his service, and so far he prevails, that very few of this rank are found among Christian disciples, not many wise. Indeed, God will not have his kingdom, either in the heart or in the world, maintained by carnal policy. It is a gospel command that we walk in godly simplicity. Though the serpent can shrink us into his folds and appear what he is not, yet it doth not become the saints to juggle or shuffle with God or men. And truly, when any of them have made up the serpent's utility, it hath not followed their hand. Jacob got the blessing by a willing, but he might have had it cheaper with plain dealing. Abraham and Sarah both dissembled to Amalek. God discovers their sin and reproves them for it by the mouth of a heathen. Asa, out of a state policy, joins league with Syria. Yea, pawns the vessels of the sanctuary and all for help. And what comes of this all? Herein thou hast done foolishly, saith God. From henceforth thou shalt have wars. Sinful policy shall not long thrive in the saints' hands well, but Satan will not go out of his way. He inquires for the subtilest padded men, a Balaam, Haman, Sambella, men admired for their counsel and deep plots. These are for his term. A wicked cause needs a smooth orator. Bad ware, a pleasing chapman. As a particular, his instruments he uses to seduce and corrupt the minds of men are commonly subtle, padded fellows, such that if it were possible, would deceive the very elect. This makes the apostles so jealous of the Corinthians, whom he hath espoused to Christ, least as Eve by the serpent, so their minds should be corrupted from the simplicity that is in Christ. He must be a cunning devil indeed, that can draw off the spouse's love from her beloved. Yet there is such a witchery in Satan's instruments that many have been brought to fly on the face of these truths and ordinances, yea, Christ himself, to whom they have seemed espoused formerly. Now, in three particulars, this sort of Satan's instruments shows their master's subtlety. First, in aspiring the good name of the sincere messengers of Christ. It has got Satan's old trick to raise his credit upon the ruined reputation of Christ's faithful servants. Thus he taught Korah, Dathan, and Abiram to charge Moses and Aaron. Ye take too much upon you, seeing all the congregation is holy. Numbers chapter 16, verse 3 and 16. They would make the people believe that it was the pride of their heart to claim a monopoly to themselves, as if none but Aaron and his fraternity were holy enough to offer incense. And by this subtle practice, they seduced for a while, in a manner, the whole congregation to their side. So the lying prophets that were Satan's knights of the post to Ahab fell foul on good Micaiah. Our Savior himself was no better handled by the Pharisees and their confederates. And Paul, the chief of the apostles, his ministry undermined and his reputation blasted by false teachers, as if he had been some weak, sorry preacher. 2 Corinthians 10:10. His bodily presence is weak, say they, and his speech contemptible. And is this your admired man? Secondly, in covering their impostures and errors with choice notions and excellent truths, Arius himself and other dangerous instruments of Satan were too wise to stuff their discourses with nothing but heterodox matter, precious truths dropped from them, with which they sprinkled their corrupt principles, yet with such art as should not easily be discerned. This, as one observes, our Savior warns his disciple of, when he bids them, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, that is, of their error. But why leaven? For the secret measure of it with the whole bread. You do not make your bread all of leaven. None would then eat it, but crumble a little into a whole batch, which sours all. Thus Christ doeth tell the disciples that the Pharisees, among many truths mixed, their errors, and therefore it behooves them to beware, lest with the truth the error go down also. Again, leaven is very like the dough, of the same grain with it, only differs in age and sourness. Thus Christ imitates the resemblance of their errors to the truth, scraped, as it were, out of the Scriptures, but soured with their false glosses. This indeed makes it easy for Christ's sheep to be infected with the scape of error, because that weed which breeds the rot is so like the grass that nourishes them. Thirdly, their subtlety appears in holding forth such principles as are indulgent to the flesh. This brings in whole schools of silly souls into their net. The heart of man loves a life to shape a religion according to his own humor, and is ready to believe that to be a truth which favors his own inclination. Now there are three lusts that Satan's instruments labor to gratify in their doctrine: carnal reason, pride, and fleshly liberty. First, carnal reason. This is the great idol which the more intelligent part of the world worship, making it the very standard of their faith. And from this bitter root has sprung those Arian and Socinian heresies. Footnote. These deny the deity of Christ. End of footnote. And truly, he that will go no further than reason will carry him may hold out in the plain way of the moral law. But when he comes to the depths of the gospel, he must either go back or be content that faith should help reason over. Secondly, another lust that Satan conquers: pride. Man, naturally, would be a god to himself, though by clambering so high he got his fall. And whatever doctrine nourishes a good opinion of man in his own eye, this is acceptable to him. And this has spawned another fry of dangerous errors: the pelagian and the semi-pelagian, which set nature upon its own legs and persuade man he can go alone to Christ, or at least with a little external help of the hand to lead or argument to excite, without any creating work in the soul. Oh, we cannot conceive how glib such stuff goes down. If one workman should tell you that your house is rotten and must be pulled down and ornamental materials prepared, and another should say, no such matter, such a beam is good, and such a spare may stand, a little cost will serve the turn. It will no wonder that you should listen to him that would put you to least cost and trouble. A faithful servants of Christ tell sinners from the Word, that man in his natural state is corrupt and rotten, that nothing of his old frame will serve, and there must needs be all new. But in comes the Arminian, and blows up the sinner's pride, and tells him he is not so weak and wicked as the other represents him. If thou wilt, thou mayest repent and believe, or at least, by exerting thy natural abilities, oblige God to superadd what thou hast not. This is the workman that will please proud men best. Thirdly, Satan by his instruments nourishes that desire of fleshly liberty, which is in man by nature, who is a son of Belial, without yoke. And if he must wear any, that will please best, which hath the softest lining, impinges the flesh least. And therefore, when the sincere teachers of the Word will not obey the strictness of the command, but press sincere obedience to it, then come Satan's instruments and say, these are hard taskmasters, who will not allow one play day in a year to the Christian, but tie him to continual duty. He will show you an easier way to heaven. Come, says the Papist, confess but once a year to the priest, pay him well for his pains, and be an obedient son of the church, and we will dispense with all the rest. Come, saith the antinomian, the gospel character allows more liberty than these legal preachers tell you of. They bid you repent and believe, when Christ hath done all these to your hand. What have you left to do but to nourish the flesh? Something sure is in it. The impostors find such quick return for their wear, while truth hangs upon the hand. And is it not this, that they are contented to afford heaven cheaper to their disciples than Christ will to his? He that sells cheapest shall have the most customers, though at best will be the best cheap. Truth with self-denial, a better pennyworth than error with its flesh-pleasing. Fourthly, Satan makes choice of such as have a great name for holiness, none to a live bird to draw other birds into the net. But it is possible that such should do this work for the devil. Yes, such is the policy of Satan, and the frailty of the best, that the most holy men have been his instruments to seduce others. Satan. Abraham, he tempts his wife to lie. Say thou art my sister. The old prophet leads the man of God out of the way. 1 Kings chapter 13. The holiness of the man and the reverency of his age, it is like gave authority to his counsel. Oh, how this should make you watchful, whose long travail and great progress in the ways of God have gained you a name of eminency of the church. What you say, do, or hold, because you are file-leading men, and others look more to you than their way. Fifthly, Satan chooses such as by relation or affection have deep interest in the persons he would gain. Some will kiss the child for his nurse's sake, and like the present for the hand that brings it. It is not likely David would have received that from Nabal, which he took from Abigail, and thanked her. Satan sent the apple by Eve's hand to Adam. Delilah doth more with Samson than all the Philistines' bands. Job's wife brings him the poison. Curse God and die. Some think Satan spared her life when he slew his children and servants, though she was also within his commission, as the most likely instrument, by reason of her relation and his affection, to lead him into temptations. Satan employs Peter, the disciple, to tempt God. At another time, his friends and kinsfolk. Some martyrs have confessed the hardest work they met with was to overcome the prayers and tears of their friends and relations. Paul himself could not get off the snare without heartbreaking. What mean you to weep and to break my heart? Acts 21, verse 13. The Christian in Complete Armour by Gurnall. Ephesians 6, verse 11. Chapter 5, chapter 4 of 5. Wherein the point of Satan's subtlety as a tempter to sin is briefly applied. Use 1. First, affect not sinful policy and subtlety. It makes you but like the devil. There is the wisest of a serpent which is commended, and that is his perfection as a creature, in which both the liberal and the mystical excel. The one is an ingenious observing nature above the beasts of the field, and the other in knowledge as an angel above men. But as the subtlety of the one and knowledge of the other is degenerate, and makes them more able to do mischief, the one out to the bodies, and the other to the souls of men, this kind of wisdom and subtlety is to be abhorred by us. The serpent's eye, as one saith, does well only in the dove's head. First, affect not subtlety in contriving any sin. Some are wise to do evil. Jeremiah 4:22. Masters of this craft, who can, as they lie on their beds, cast their wicked designs into an artificial method, showing a kind of devilish wit therein, as the Egyptians, who dwelt wisely, as they thought, from the Israelites and Jezebel, who had printed her bloody design, in so fair a letter that some might read her saint, while she was playing the devil. This is the black art indeed, and will make the soul as black as hell that practiseth it. It is not hard for any, though a fool, to learn, but be but wicked, and the devil will help thee to be witty. Come but a while to his school, and thou mayest soon be a cunning man. No sin speak I attainment, in wickedness than those which are the result of deliberate counsel and deep plottings. Creatures, as they go longer with their youth, so their birth is more strong and perfect, as the elephant above all others. The longer a sin is in forming and forging within, and the oftener the head and the heart meet about it, the more complete the sin. Here are many letters of unformed sin in one, such, I mean, that are conceived and cast forth in a hurry of an exemplary passion. Such sudden acts show weakness, these others show deep wickedness. Secondly, take heed of hiding sin when thou hast committed it. This is one of the devices that is in man's heart, and as much art and cunning is shown in this as in any one part of the sinner's trade. What a trick has the patriarchs to blind their father's eye with a bloody cup. Joseph's mistress, to prevent a charge from Joseph, accuses him for what she is guilty, like the robber who escaped by crying, "Stop the thief." God taught man to make coats to cover his naked body, but the devil learned him to weave these coverings to hide the nakedness of the soul. The more subtle thou seemest in concealing thy sin, the more egregiously thou playest the fool. None so shamed as the liar when found out, and thou art sure to be. Thy covering is too short to hide thee from God's eye and what God sees. If thou dost not put thyself to shame, he will tell all the world of hereafter. However, thou escapest in this life. Thirdly, take heed of subtlety and sinful policy. In compassing that which is lawful in itself, it is lawful to improve thy estate and husband it well for thy posterity. But take not the devil's counsel. It will be putting thee upon some tricks in thy trade, and sleights in thy dealings. Such may go for wise men a while, but the prophet reads their destinies. Jeremiah 16, verse 11. At the end he shall be a fool. It is lawful to love our estate, life, liberty, but beware of sinful policy to save them. It is no wisdom to shuffle with God by denying his truth, or shifting off our duty to keep correspondency with men. He is a weak fender that lays his soul at open guard to be stabbed and wounded with guilt, while he is lifting up his hands to save a broken head. Our fear commonly meets us at that door, by which we think to run from it. He that will save his life shall lose it. As you love your peace, Christians, be plain-hearted with God and man, and keep the King's highway. go the plain way of the command to obtain thy desire, and not to leap over hedge and ditch to come a little sooner to the journey's end. Such commonly either meet with some stop that makes them come back with shame, or else put to venture their necks in some desperate leap. He is sure to come safer, if not sooner, home, that is willing to go a little about to keep God's company. The historian's observation is worth the Christian's remembrancing.